Hello, welcome everybody. I'm continuing my series of videos on Buddhism, Basic 101. Today I wanted to share a sutra with you. I'm going to explain what a sutra is, and I'm also going to share with you this particular sutra, which are the Buddha's instructions for how to meditate. Now it's important to remember that the Buddha didn't just teach meditation. Meditation was around during the Buddha's time. The Buddha just taught peace. He taught suffering and the end of suffering, or the cessation of suffering, that there is such a thing called nirvana. The word nirvana or nibbana in the Pali word, Pali is the language that the Buddha actually spoke. Nibbana means like a cooling off, like when you take a cake out of the oven and it just cools off. It's kind of like the cooling off of our mind when it's too focused or narrowed or clinging or centered. When it's too hot, this is a cooling of the mind, is nirvana, is what the Buddha taught. And the Buddha taught many, many different techniques and many, many different teachings and lessons on how to get to nirvana in this original set of teachings called the First Turning Teachings. Some people know it as the Theravadan teachings or the teachings of the elders. Later on, there's more sophisticated schools. We could say sophisticated, or just a different set of mentalities, philosophies that develop from this first elder lineage called the Theravadan lineage, which continues nowadays in Sri Lanka and countries like Thailand and Southeast Asia. Then we have the Mahayana schools of Buddhism, which are in countries like China and Tibet and Japan and Korea. The Mahayana schools, they stem off of the Theravadan schools. So when we study a sutra like the one from today, a sutta in Pali, sutra would be in Sanskrit, which is where most of the Mahayana comes from, Sanskrit and Chinese. So when we study the Pali canon, which is this original canon, the word sutra appears as sutta. So this first sutra that we're going to study is called the Anapanasati Sutra. Now a sutra, you've heard me say this word several times now, it is one of the Buddha's teachings, but these sutras were not found in a written format until the year 1500 AD. That's the earliest sutras we have available. Written sutras are in the year 1500, and the Buddha himself, these teachings go back 2500 years ago. So it's important to remember that for at least 1,000 years, these sutras were passed on from mouth to mouth, from teacher to student. This was an oral tradition, and it's very, very recent. Only about 500 years that we've had them written down, and it's only very, very recent, in the past maybe 30 or 40 years, that people have easy access to translations in Western languages of these sutras. So we have just begun to study these sutras. The study of this particular sutra comes from a very popular book. It's out there on Kindle and it's on Amazon, called Breath by Breath by Larry Rosenberg. He follows the Insight Meditation Society tradition. And these are, again, these are American teachings based on the Theravadan lineage. So we could even say that this is American Buddhism. So the Buddha taught as many different kinds of techniques as there are different kinds of people. Each sutra, it's said that when the Buddha died, they gathered all of his main attendants, including his number one attendant called Ananda, and they started to say, okay, what was it that the Buddha taught? And they got together and started brainstorming, and they put together this series of chants, which we now call sutras, it's the same root etymologically as the word to suture. So these are like the threads that wove together the Buddha's teachings from student to master to student. Over the years, this is how we've gotten most of the Buddha's teachings come from sutras. A second set of teachings comes from the Vinaya, which is the monastic moral code. And a third set of these teachings come from the Abhidharma, which is how the monks debated the ontology and the epistemology of the teachings. So meditation was not the only way that the Buddha taught nirvana or nibbana, but it is the shortest, the most direct, and the easiest, the quickest way in which one can get to the cessation of suffering, is through meditation. So the Anapanasati Sutra, I'm going to chant it for you. I'm not going to chant it as it's very condensed. I'm just going to share it with you. And then we'll look at its meaning a little bit more closely. So I'm going to read this off of my phone. So originally the sutras begin with the words, "Thus have I heard." Evam maya shrutra in Sanskrit. It's a way of saying, this isn't what I have to say about the teachings. This is what has been told to me. This is what has been taught to me by my teachers. So it's very frequent to say in Buddhism, everything that I get right about the teachings, please attribute it to my teachers. And everything I get wrong about these teachings, you can blame me. This Anapanasati Sutra, the name of it, Anapana, comes from ana, which means inward, and apana, which means outward. And these words are usually referred to the breathing. So this sutra, sati means truth or knowingness. So anapanasati is the knowing of the in and out breathing in parentheses. That's the name of this sutra. And this sutra is divided into tetrads, which means instructions in sets of 4. And it's 4 tetrads, so we have 16 instructions, 16 lines that compose this sutra. And these instructions, they are progressive, and you can see the 4 foundations of mindfulness laid out in this sutra. And we can also see how in the last tetrad, the first tetrad is included. So it's a little bit fractalic, which is why I like this particular sutra. It goes like this. While breathing in long, one knows, I breathe in long. While breathing out long, one knows, I breathe out long. While breathing in short, one knows, I breathe in short. While breathing out short, one knows, I breathe out short. While one trains oneself, sensitive to the whole body, I breathe in. Sensitive to the whole body, I breathe out. One trains oneself, calming the whole body, I breathe in. Calming the whole body, I breathe out. That's the first tetrad. One trains oneself, sensitive to rapture, I breathe in. Sensitive to rapture, I breathe out. One trains oneself, sensitive to pleasure, I breathe in. Sensitive to pleasure, I breathe out. One trains oneself, sensitive to mental processes, I breathe in. Sensitive to mental processes, I breathe out. One trains oneself, calming mental processes, I breathe in. Calming mental processes, I breathe out. That's the second triad. The third tetrad, sorry. One trains oneself, sensitive to the mind, I breathe in. Sensitive to the mind, I breathe out. One trains oneself, gladdening the mind, I breathe in. Gladdening the mind, I breathe out. 11. One trains oneself, steadying the mind, I breathe in. Steadying the mind, I breathe out. 12. One trains oneself, liberating the mind, I breathe in. Liberating the mind, I breathe out. And in the fourth tetrad, 13, one trains oneself, focusing on impermanence, I breathe in. Focusing on impermanence, I breathe out. 14, one trains oneself, focusing on fading away, I breathe in. Focusing on fading away, I breathe out. 15, one trains oneself, focusing on cessation, I breathe in. Focusing on cessation, I breathe out. And the last one trains oneself, focusing on relinquishment, I breathe in. Focusing on relinquishment, I breathe out. So as you can see in the last tetrad, it's all about letting go. First you focus on impermanence, but then you focus on fading away, cessation, relinquishment. And this could be likened to the very first instruction. Sensitive to the breath, I breathe in. When I breathe in short, while breathing in short, I know I breathe in short. So the first four are all about just bringing awareness to the breath. When I breathe in short, I know that I'm breathing in short. It kind of cuts off the sensitivity to the mind, to everything else that's happening in the mental processes, and just focuses on the breathing, the very simple process of breathing, which is very sensorial, it's very direct. Now, by breathing in short and breathing out long, it's talking about the quality of breathing. It's not so much that we breathe in short and then we breathe out long. We can, but it's more about focusing on the qualities of breathing. It doesn't matter where we notice the breath. Sometimes we notice it in the chest. Sometimes we notice it in the belly. Sometimes we notice it here in the nostrils. Sometimes it's all over. It doesn't matter. What we realize is whether the breath is hot or cold, whether the breathing is fast or slow. That's how we begin. Anapanasati. If we follow the other tetrads, it's all about the body, sensitive to the body, but it's through the breath that we get to being aware of the body. So again, the first two are while breathing in long and while breathing out long. One knows I breathe in long and I breathe out long. While breathing in short and while breathing out short, one knows I breathe in short and I breathe out short. And the third one, it's sensitive to the whole body. So it's almost as if it's saying that the breath is just a small part of the body. But we know that the breath also is happening in the whole body at once. It's very difficult to pay attention to the body as a whole because there's so much going on unless we have an entrance, which is this breath, this breathing. It's an anchor. Why? Because of what we get in the final tetrad, impermanence, focusing on impermanence. This is very important in Buddhism, is that dharmas or phenomena are always changing. And because they're always changing, it's very hard to fix on to one thing. That's why the final tetrad has fading away. It focuses on cessation. So the final tetrad is focusing on these big truths of Buddhism. The dharmas, the four seals of dharma, we could say. All phenomena are impermanent. All contaminated phenomena are suffering. They're fading away. They lack a sense of inherent self. They lack an ego. There's no separation between the mind and the body. But in order to realize that there's no separation between the mind and the body, first, this meditation separates, focusing first on the body, and then we focus on mental processes. If you try and find where does your body, your physical sensations, if it's really separate from the mind, which is what ego is trying to convince us of, where is it that these two meet? If they're really separate, they have to meet somewhere. But if we try and find the meeting place of the body, of the physical body, the sensations and the touch, and the mind, which is experiencing the touch, if we try to find where do they meet, there's no finding. We can rationalize a thought about how the mind and the body meet in the brain and in the neurons, but not even then on a physical level, on a sensorial level. If we try and find this meeting point, the mind is very clear and very luminous, very awake. The body might feel a little more heavy, a little more defined in terms of touch, but there is no finding where the mind and the body meet. So even in this third instruction, sensitive to the whole body, I breathe in, sensitive to the whole body, I breathe out. The mind is already there. But we're ignoring most of mind and just focusing on this touch, on this very touch sensorial process of breathing in and breathing out short and long. One trains oneself calming the whole body, I breathe in. One trains oneself calming the whole body, I breathe out. And here the language changes from, while breathing in, one knows this. Now it says one trains oneself, sensitive to the whole body. It takes a while. It takes practice. That's why it's called a meditation practice. And we know the whole body, and then we calm the whole body. So the first tetrad is called the tetrad of the body. The second tetrad is called the tetrad of feelings. Feelings are this in-between state of body and mind, if we were to be able to separate body and mind, which ego always does. It tries to separate the body and the mind, when really they are this mush. The body is a thought. As well as thoughts cannot happen without a body, as far as we know. As far as we know. This is one of the things that causes us suffering, and is one of the things that might end if we see through it as an appearance, as an illusion. So the second tetrad in the feelings group, we have sensitive to rapture. Why? Because as we're sensitive to the body breathing in and sensitive to the body breathing out and calming the body, we have this feeling of letting go already. Even though we haven't gotten to the letting go, the breathing out, apana. You let go, you let out. You're already letting go. It's like a bundle that comes together, a bundle of things that come together, a bundle of straws. When you hold a bundle and suddenly you let it go, you relax it. This is what the body is doing. This is what the mind is doing, is you have this very firm grip on the breath or on the mind or on the body, and then suddenly it just lets go. So sensitive to rapture, this feeling of rapture, I breathe in. Sensitive to rapture, I breathe out. One trains oneself sensitive to pleasure, I breathe in. So then we're calming the body and the mind more and more through pleasant emotions. So meditation is not just about noticing the pain and breathing into the pain and accepting the pain. It's also about the pleasure that comes from noticing the body and the breath. Noticing the in and outness, the impermanence, the letting go. There's pleasure to that. But then there's this feeling, one trains oneself sensitive to mental processes. Why? Because we cling to that pleasure. Very quickly we cling to the mental processes, or we get distracted. And so we have to be sensitive to the fact that there is mental processes occurring. In the rapture, in the pleasure, there are mental processes. But rather than being caught up in the mental processes or identifying with these mental processes and thinking that we are these mental processes, we're just sensitive to these mental processes. We are abstracting ourselves in meditation more and more. Now we're abstracting, are sensitive to these mental processes as if I am here and the mental processes are elsewhere. We're able to zoom out, and then we get one trains oneself calming mental processes. I breathe in. So again, we have this bundle of mental processes and calming them. We calm them. We allow them. So we are still using the breath as an anchor. I breathe in, I breathe out. I breathe in, I breathe out. Every instruction has I breathe in, I breathe out. So we're still very much sticking to these first two instructions of knowing I breathe in short or knowing I breathe out long. We're still sensitive to that. Now we get to the third tetrad, which is the mind. One trains oneself, sensitive to the mind, I breathe in, sensitive to the mind, I breathe out. So now we can view the mind as something much vaster than just the body. It's all of these memories about the past or these wishes for the future. The mind is happening, a lot is happening, a lot more than this sense direct process is happening. Cognition is happening at a very vast level. And we can be sensitive to it, breathing in and breathing out. Then we get the 10th instruction, gladdening the mind. So this pleasure that we had of noticing the body breathing in and breathing out, we can use it to clarify now the whole mind. Gladdening the mind. We actually put some intention into becoming more glad of the mind. Steadying the mind is the next instruction. One trains oneself. It takes practice. You might be already losing an attention span from listening to this video, which is already 20 minutes long. So it's longer than I had intended, but we're sharing this sutra together. So you could take this as a intro to the training. I'm going to make some videos with some guided meditations, and they're going to be about 20 minutes long. So this is more or less where we start losing our attention span. This is more or less during a meditation session where we start to zone out. And so that's why this instruction is very important. Steadying the mind, I breathe in. Steadying the mind, I breathe out. And from years of experience, I can tell you a very quick, short inhale and a very long exhale can really sharpen the mind. Steadying the mind, I breathe in. Steadying the mind, I breathe out. Then we have the 12th instruction, liberating the mind, I breathe in. So rather than holding on to it, because the instructions of meditation are to somehow hold our mind, but there's a very subtle difference from holding and clinging, right? And so anyone who's been in love knows this difference, or anyone who has held a very delicate creature knows the difference between holding and clinging, or if you've been held. So that's how we're holding the breath, that's how we are holding the body, that's how we are holding the mind, that's how we are holding our practice, is not too tight and not too loose. And so now we get the 4 big dharmas in the 4th tetrad. One trains oneself focusing on impermanence, I breathe in. So after you zoom out so much that you can see the whole mind and stay with it, you start to focus on how it's all changing, which is something that's been present from the very beginning. This has been present from the very first one where we breathed in short and long. Now we're sensitive to how it's all impermanent. But now we're focusing, the mindfulness is being focused intentionally on the impermanence of all things, of all phenomena. So I'll make a guided video relating to this sutra. So we focus on the impermanence, and then we can focus on how there is no sense of self. Very naturally, when we focus on impermanence, we focus on fading away, as the instruction says. I breathe in, focusing on fading away. I breathe out. This sense of I, me, and mine. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. These are my memories. These are my sensations, my sounds, my feelings, my mind. We lose all of it, fading away. We fade ourselves away, focusing on how we fade away every moment. We make ourselves up again, and then we fade away again. This is what the Buddha was getting at when he taught. Even though he taught different things to different people, this is the core teachings of what the Buddha taught, of no self. He didn't mean that there's nothing. He wasn't a nihilist. He just meant we fade away all the time. If we just notice that we're fading away. But then the other seal of Dharma is that everything has suffering to it. And this was the first noble truth, remember. And so that's why we focus on cessation of suffering. We can only cease the suffering once we notice that it's there. So this is the brilliance of the Four Noble Truths. There is a cessation to suffering, the third noble truth, but you can only see that when you noticed the first one in the first place. You can only let go of pain when you notice you are in pain. It's sort of like that parable of the fish when they ask them, how's the water today? And the fish says, what's water? The fish doesn't know it's in water because it's always been in it. We don't know that we are suffering in a condition until we're taught something different, until we see something different. This is how social conditioning happens. We don't notice we're a part of it because we are a part of it. So meditation is trying to get us to remove ourselves from ourselves. One trains oneself focusing on cessation. I breathe in, focusing on cessation. I breathe out. And finally, the last one trains oneself focusing on relinquishment. I breathe in, focusing on relinquishment. I breathe out. So relinquishment is a very active verb, letting go. Focusing on how letting go happens. I breathe in, focusing on how letting go happens. I breathe out. But the most direct form of relinquishment is happening in the breathing itself, in the breath itself. So that's how it was there from the very beginning. This relinquishment, this process of relinquishment. That is Anapanasati, knowingness of in and out breathing. That is this sutra. And I really recommend Richard's book. Is that his name? Richard? Breath by Breath? No, Larry Rosenberg. Larry, not Richard. I really recommend this book. If you have the time during this weird, strange quarantine times of COVID, because we spend a lot of time with ourselves, we spend a lot of time with our mind, we spend a lot of time with our breathing. It's good to sometimes read about very basic meditation, which isn't so basic once you start scratching the surface. Right? The mind is always fresh, it's always new. We get old with it. We get old age mentality with it because we always want more. We always want to grasp the pleasure, but the pleasure can be found already in the present moment if we allow ourselves that possibility of where we stop looking for something external to fill us. We stop looking for the external thing to save us, and we realize more and more by letting go that we can be happy with what we have. It's a tall order. It's a very tall order, inner peace. But it has to start somewhere, and it can start right here and now by just sitting down and relating with the breathing. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you more for more Buddhism, basic Buddhism, very soon.